Luke 16 and verse 10. We're just going to read a few verses here. Luke 16, verse 10 and following. And I do appreciate your prayers. If I think I can make it through the day, but anyway, God's grace is sufficient. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. And there's no question about that. God is not saying most of the time or sometimes, or that is an absolute fact, as much as 2 plus 2 equals 4. Anyone that is faithful in a little is faithful in much. Verse 11, if therefore you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. We'll leave off reading there, and we're going to talk about character again still today, and our next topic of character is this thing of stewardship. Stewardship. What is the definition of stewardship? If you had to define stewardship for someone else who had never heard that word, what would you tell them? What is stewardship? Sabrina?
Taking care of something that somebody else has been watching over.
Yeah.
Something for someone.
It's taking care of something that someone else is. Anybody else want to add to that? Anybody? Claudia?
Wisdom as to how to direct those funds and those things that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
Wisdom, that's
Right.
the
Managing. Brother Ben, did you have your hand up?
The question is how to stir the bar for a person?
Yeah, stewardship. Well, how would you tell someone else about what stewardship was if they'd never heard that word before? Yeah. It's mostly, the way I remember stewardship, and everything you said is right, but it's managing. You're a manager. You're a manager. And the easiest way to remember that is, if you were an employee at a particular business company, the owner of the company owns the business. But if he were to hire you as manager, then you would be in charge of everything in that business, but it's not yours. It's his. And he's hired you, or he's given you the privilege, the opportunity to manage everything in that business, but it still belongs to him. So it's not, that's the easiest way. It's management. It's managing someone else's possessions. In this case, the Lord's possessions, right? As Christians, managing. Now, what has God given us that's really not ours that we need to manage wisely? Anybody? Sabrina?
Biggest thing is the souls lost, just managing, paying for, fighting for.
Okay. Well, now, I think I know what you're saying, but those souls aren't ours. But I think I know what. Maybe I think I know what you're saying is that the time that God has given us, we need to manage it in trying to reach those souls. The time. Anything else, Miss Mary Jane? Finances, right? Absolutely. Most people think about stewardship as being a matter of money, but it's really not a matter of money. It's a matter of character. Character. So there's 3 T's: time, treasure. What's the third one? Anybody? Talents. Time, talents, and treasure. you have time. Everybody has the same amount of time. Everybody has 24 hours a day. Everybody has the same amount of time in life, depending on how long you live, but every day you have 24 hours. And not everybody has the same amount of money, obviously, but whatever money you have, God's given you. Whatever time you have, God's given you. Whatever talents you may possess, God has given you the abilities to do something, maybe a little bit better than somebody else. But you have time. You have some kind of talent. I mean, you may not think maybe you can't play an instrument, or maybe you can't sing, but you have abilities that God has given you. Abilities. You have things that you can do. That maybe there's other people that can do them better, but that's not the point. We don't manage what other people have. We manage what God's given us. And God's given us time. He's given us talents. He's given us treasure. Every one of us has some kind of income and some kind of ability and some kind of money that goes through our hands, and we have to manage it properly because it all belongs to God. Our bodies are God's. Our bodies belong to God. We have to remember that too. We are not our own. We're bought with a price. We're to glorify God in our bodies and our spirits, which are God's. It's all part of stewardship, but it really boils down to character. How you manage, for instance, going back to my illustration of a boss, an owner of a business, hiring a manager to oversee everything in that business, he's not going to hire someone that can't even come to work on time. Why? Because they're bad stewards? No, because they're bad character. A person who has a poor stewardship is not because they don't know how to manage their money necessarily. Now, that can be learned, but it's because they just don't have enough character to manage somebody else's belongings. Stewardship, let me make this statement here. Stewardship has to do with your character, not so much your money or your possessions. Stewardship, good godly stewardship, has to do with your character, not how much money you have or how much you possess. So who can finish this verse for me? I'm going to quote 1 Corinthians 4:2. It is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. It's required. Okay? Faithfulness has really nothing to do with money, does it? Faithfulness has to do with character. And if a steward is going to be what the kind of steward that he or she needs to be, it's required that he be found faithful. So it really has nothing to do with money. It has to do with character. And that's what these verses are telling us here in Luke chapter 16. He that is faithful, in verse 10, in that which is least, is faithful also in much. Not shall be, but is. Is. If you are faithful in the least of your money and possessions, you have the character to be faithful in much. And vice versa, right? If you aren't, then you don't have the character to be in, if he that is unjust, in verse 10, or unfaithful in the least is unjust also in much. It's not a matter of I got to get more to find out. It's already there. If you have problems in the least, then you're going to have problems with more. Character is not built as your money and possessions grow. Your character only becomes more noticeable, or lack thereof. Let me say that again. You don't build character as your income grows, or you possess more things, more material possessions. What happens is your character just becomes more noticeable. It's more evident what kind of character you have with more possessions or more money. Okay? That makes sense? Look in Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12, at the end of the chapter, verse 41. And Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Now, who had more character? Right? Who had more character, the rich people or this poor little widow? Yeah, the poor little widow. The widow woman who dropped in 2 mites, she had more faith, more character, but notice, only Jesus noticed it. Only Jesus noticed it. See, what she did with the money was evidence of her character. And Jesus notices things like that. We're not out there looking for people. Again, we're not out there trying to call down and call up people who have character, and that's not what we're talking about today. But what we are learning from is that Jesus knows who has character and who doesn't. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money you have. It doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money you have. Now, good independent Baptists, especially pastors, we would love to have those that were rich casting in much. But the bottom line is they don't have the character that a poor little widow casting in all she has, they don't have the same character. They were showing off. They were literally showing off. So it's an interesting distinction made here, but it's the bottom line is, you can't build a church on poor character. Poor character in church members is not going to help a church be strong, no matter how much money they have, right? So the Bible tells us if you're unjust in the least of your money and possessions, which this widow was very faithful, if you're unjust in the least of your money and your possessions, you will not have the character to be just when you have a lot. You will remain unfaithful in all of your dealings, regardless of how much character you have. So, what's the key? The key to wise stewardship is to learn to build character and be faithful when you have little. That's what God wants in Luke 16. You can go back over there. Luke 16. He that is faithful, in verse 10, in that which is least, is faithful also in much. So you need to realize you're honest about your own character. What do you do with your time? What do you do with your talents? What do you do with your treasures? What do you do with your body and your spirit, which are God's? What do you do with those things that God has given you? You say, well, I don't have much. Well, that's not the point. The point is, what do you do with what you do have? How do you manage that which you do have? And of course, we talk about tithing and we talk about giving to missions, but those are just a couple of examples, really. But what about time? We talked about time with souls and being witnesses and praying and walking with God. What are some other ways that we can manage our time with character, godly character? Bible reading, church attendance, absolutely. Yeah, managing the time that God gives you, being faithful with, again, the time we have is every one of us has the same amount of time every day. But you have a little bit of time that you can, if you have a little bit of free time, what do you do with that? That's what we're kind of looking at. The free time that you have, what do you do with the free time? And there's nothing wrong with relaxing or resting, but that's how people kind of get lazy, is they use all their free time for themselves. And then that's not wise management, because you're not really, well, balance is the key, I guess. Balance is the key. A false balance is abomination, but being balanced and, but really putting Jesus first, putting others second, and putting yourself last, right? Joy, Jesus, others, and you. What a wonderful way to spell joy. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. In Matthew 6:33. So you seek God first and his righteousness, and then things which are possessions are added later. It's management. It's wisdom. And like we said, wisdom in character is not, again, it's not about what you have. It's about what you do with what you have. That's why he says there in verse 11, if therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon. Now what is that unrighteous mammon? Verse 11. Any ideas? Unrighteous mammon. What's mammon? Not manna. Mammon. What? Money. What's unrighteous mammon? Just money that comes to you for no real righteous reasons, right? It's just money that the world lives for and the money dies for, the world loves and dies for. It's unrighteous mammon. It's just money that really has nothing to do with God, that didn't come to you because that you would have had anyway, kind of, money that you can earn on your own without God even being involved. Because let's just face it, the world has money. Satan has money. Look at his churches. Look at those. You drive around anywhere, you see churches, mega buildings. And they're building new ones all the time. It's amazing the millions of dollars that are being spent on church buildings, teaching all kinds of erroneous, false, devilish doctrines. That's unrighteous mammon. Well, if you're not faithful in that, what you do, let me read it to you this way. What you do with the little God gives you determines your character, right? We already talked about that. Then that character determines whether or not you will ever be entrusted with true riches. True riches. That's what it says there in verse 11. It's an interesting question. If therefore you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? Wouldn't you agree that God proves our hearts, right? And it's very easy to be unfaithful. Would you agree that it's natural to be unfaithful with your money, time, treasure? It's natural just to be selfish. Let's going back to my illustration. You got the boss of the company and then the manager underneath the boss, and he's over everything. The boss just says, okay, you take care of it all. I'm going to go on vacation. And so you're the manager, and you have total control over everything, but none of it belongs to you. Okay? Now, so he comes back from vacation. He finds out that everything's fallen apart. Everybody quit. All the finances are a disaster. The books are broken, and there's no business is going. In the sewer. Nothing is going right, and he's come back. Now, what is he gonna promote you? No. He's going to find somebody else. He's going to replace you. Now, we can't lose our salvation, you understand that. But the point of the matter is, God is not going to trust us with more. Of course, we can't have more time. But we could have more free time. How could you have more free time? Anybody? How could you have more free time? Yeah. Brother Benny? Yeah. By spending the time that you have wisely. The things that you have to do, you do them first, promptly. And that's the way we always try to raise our kids. So you do what you have to do first, and then you do what you want to do after that. If you do what you have to do first, but you also need to do it correctly.
My grandmother used to say, what you hate worse, do first.
Yeah, what you hate worst, do first. My kids, when we would sit them down at the table and set a plate of food before them, of course, they like this and they like that, but spinach or green beans or, and they weren't allowed to just not eat it. And I taught them, I said, just eat what you don't like first. Eat what you don't like first, and then you can finish up with what you like. That way, when you can wash the taste out of your mouth with what you do like. But instead of just throwing it away, you're going to eat it. You just eat what you like first. Eat what you don't like first. And before you know it, sooner or later, they start to like what they don't like, because they didn't even know what it tasted like to begin with. And that's true though. You manage what you do have correctly, and you'll have more quality free time. I don't know about you, but when I know something's got to be done, and I haven't done it, I can't relax. I can't relax. I can try, but I can't rest. I'm restless at night even when I'm supposed to go to sleep, because I know, like we talked about last week, I gave somebody my word and I didn't keep it. And that's part of managing your time, just doing what you have to do. You gave somebody your word. I'm responsible to do something, but yet if I don't do it, I can't rest anyway. That's a sign of poor character. Poor character. If you're not faithful with what God considers of little value or unrighteous mammon, which, money doesn't mean anything to God. It's really not about money. I mean, does God need our money? I mean, people die over those rocks that we call diamonds. God, they're rocks. Gold, it's rocks. It's unrighteous mammon, but if we can't be faithful in what God says is unrighteous, is God going to entrust us with real value, true riches of life? What are the true riches? Well, salvation, possibly, yeah. How would salvation fit in there? Well, it's definitely true. It's definitely the absolute truest riches, yeah. Absolutely. What were you going to say, Ms. Claudia?
Our rewards in heaven and
Yeah. What about your rewards in heaven? How many Christians even think about that? Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth. Matthew chapter 6. Let's look at it. Because that is what, I'll be honest with you, keeps me going many, many times. Matthew 6:19. Lay not up for yourselves. He may need some help. His phone. Sing. You got it? He's getting better. Did you get it, Jaquarius? Man, he's got it on the ball. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal. Now, those buildings I was talking about a minute ago, those rich, mega $1 million edifices that are being erected by false prophets, that's moth and rust and thieves, and it's just going to end up, heaven and earth shall pass away. But, verse 20, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through nor steal, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Every one of us, I think I'm speaking for all of us, but every one of us could have more in this life. I could have more in this life. But I give God what I'm supposed to give God. I give God way more than I have to give God as far as that goes. And I'm not bragging about anything. I'm just saying because of Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, verse 20, 19 to 20, those verses keep me going many, many times. Many, many times. I'm laying up treasures in heaven. Yes, you could have more on this earth. You could if you didn't tithe, if you didn't give to missions, if you didn't give love offerings, if you didn't give to special needs, or if you didn't give to, ministries of your church. You could have more on this earth. You could have a bigger house. You could have a newer car. You could have newer clothes. You could have more. You could. But it's all going to burn. It's all going to burn. And so God will not entrust you those true riches of life until you learn that principle. True riches in life, how about wisdom? Wisdom, discernment. True riches for God are not riches at all when it comes to what we think. It's not money. Money is unrighteous mammon. You cannot serve God and mammon, verse 13 of Luke 16. You cannot serve God and mammon. It doesn't say you shouldn't. It says you can't. So if you're living for the unrighteous mammon, which is covetousness, then you're not serving God. You can't. You can't do both. No servant can serve two masters. And verse 12 says, if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? Again, that going back to that boss of the company and the manager, if you're not faithful in managing his affairs, his business, his possessions, his money, then you're certainly never going to have your own. You're never going to, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I've heard people say, when I get this paid off, then I'll start tithing. When I get this out of debt, I'll start tithing. And I don't argue with them. I just, okay, good. I hope so. But the bottom line is that's not true. The reason you're in debt is because you're not tithing. And if you start tithing now, you get out of debt faster. But and I understand I'm not making light of it. Debt is real and it's a pain. And most of the time we get ourselves in that debt because of our lack of character. But the bottom line is to get out of it, you start to prove yourself faithful in the little that you have left. And God begins to bless you with true riches like wisdom. How to spend your money. How to spend what you have left. How to say no to things that you don't need. Temperance, not buying what you don't need, not spending time doing things that are going to tear down your spirit instead of edify it. You'll never be a great businessman someday if you're not a good employee today. You'll never be a leader if you're not a good follower. Never. God will not. Let's face it, it's God that promotes. God promotes people. I mean, Paul said, I thank my God who hath counted me faithful, putting me in the ministry. It doesn't make a man who's a preacher or in the ministry some kind of perfect man, or he's certainly not worthy of worship or anything like that. But it's just a matter of having proven character. Proven character. That's all faithfulness is, right? It's proven character over time. Proven character. That's why it's required in stewards that a man be found faithful. There are requirements for leadership in this church. There are requirements for leadership because that's the way God has established it. You'll never be, of course, you'll never be a good husband or wife until you're a good son or daughter, and so on. Okay, whatever you do with a little determines what you will do with much. It also determines if you'll ever even get much. Again, it's not really money, but it would be nice to have a little bit more money for things that you need, right? Would anybody disagree with that? I didn't think so. But if you do not learn the lesson of character in your stewardship, you will seldom have much to be a steward over. And that's just the bottom line. God doesn't say it should be. It's just flat out. He says, if you're unfaithful in that which is least, you'll be unfaithful in much. Period. You already are. You already are. God will not bless someone who displays no character with what he initially invests with him. He won't. He can't, because he knows you're going to be unfaithful. He knows we are going to be unfaithful. Look in Matthew 25. Matthew 25. Matthew 25, verse 28. Yeah. Matthew 25, verse 28. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which hath 10 talents. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. Now, that's a parable of the talents. And the one who was unfaithful with the 1 talent, God said, take it away and give it to one who has 10. And but our democratic government, we're not like that too much. Our liberal government, we're not like that too much. Our welfare system, we're not like that too much. And that's why that stuff is absolutely tearing down the very fabric of our nation. Because we're giving people that are unfaithful with everything they have, we're just handing them more and more and more. Free everything. That's socialism. That's where communism comes from. That's where the government will begin to control the country like it already is. Because we just want to give people who don't have, we want to give them more. They've proven to be poor in their character, so we give them more. And what do we have? Well, we have a society that's absolutely sick. Sick. Go ahead.
In 24 of Matthew 25, what about God's character? They don't get much of it. I knew you were this. I knew you were this. What is it?
Yeah, I knew that thou art a hard man, and reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed yet. And I was afraid and went and hid thy talent. Yeah, there's a whole lot of teaching in that parable, but God gives us something to work with. Everybody. Where does that, does that really begin with the government, though? Where does that begin, that problem? Sabrina?
I know it keeps me going, and I think I heard in the song, it's when it's all said and done, and in heaven, I would not want to say to somebody that says, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think of anytime I'm afraid or it's hard to talk.
That's certainly part of it. We're not managing our time. We're not managing. There's a fourth T in there that I've often thought of. Time, talent, treasure, testimony. Testimony. We're not managing our testimony. God has saved us. God has changed us. But the problem with the welfare mentality where just, I don't have to work because the government will just give me free everything. I don't have to be responsible because I'm just going to get a free check anyway. Now, again, I'm not talking about disability. True, honest to God, physical disability. That's how all that started. And I'm not against that, because a disabled man or woman who can't work, or a single mother who absolutely just can't because her husband was a bum and left her or whatever, but there are, but the thing is, it's become way more than that. But did that really start with the government, or did it start somewhere else, Ms. Claudia? It started at home. At home with parents who didn't raise their, but it